So yeah, I hope you guys are having a good time. I'm Ziqq. I'm a designer at Foolproof. So Foolproof is a user experience design agency. It's a UK-based company, but we also have offices in Singapore. So I'm from the Singapore office. Today I'll be talking about the repercussions of design interventions in developing world. Really, it's a story about wisdom through failures. And this story really started all the way back in 2009. So I think in 2009, I was about in my second year in pursuing my diploma in interaction design. I spent some time, a couple of weeks in Cambodia at this children's center, is Sangkum Children's Center. Yeah, so I was there for a few weeks with my friends. We were doing some volunteer work, and it was also for the first time that I saw how design could actually impact lives almost immediately, right? So we were painting some murals at the back of the wall. We were designing a lot of other stuff within the center, helping out the kids, helping out the organization. So this incident or this story really molded me to become the designer that I am today, right? So as I graduated 5 years on later, I was working in an architecture firm. So I was as a designer in an architecture firm, and I've always had this craving or this feeling of wanting to go back to Cambodia because I always wanted to try to give back, right? So started my career in the architecture field. I always wanted to talk about going back to Cambodia. So in 2014, I had the opportunity to talk about this dream at User Experience Singapore, so UXSG conference. So similar like this, but in Singapore. So I got to talk about this dream of wanting to go back to Cambodia to design and help the community and all these things. And out of that sharing, I received a backing of $250,000. So for me at that point, that was a lot of money. And I was like, you know what, give me some time. Let me go to Cambodia and figure out what's going on the ground. So I told the investors, yeah, just give me some time. Let me just figure things out first. So I went back, right? So remember this photo in 2009, happy, colorful. 5 years later, visit the same place, and as you can see, the colors were all gone. It was all grayed out, and this was in 2014. It was quite sad. But having said that, I did connect with other organizations that were there, Friends International and Caring for Cambodia, and these two organizations were working very closely with the government, right? So they were tackling things like child exploitation, a lot of other very social, complex stuff, right? Even in education as well, right? And I soon realized with the conversations that I have with all of these different organizations and the people on the ground, I quickly learned that this was all interlinked in a web of highly wicked problems, right? We've got to understand that even Cambodia they were still recovering from a very dark history of Khmer roots, right? They had this very long, very dark phase of the country's history, right? They had even things like very poor infrastructure. They had things, poor healthcare, a lot of very complex social fabric stuff. But having said that, at the same time, I saw these different organizations, they were doing a lot of things to tackle these problems, right? And it was also good to know that the government was taking ownership of solving their own problems, because previously they had a lot of different people from different countries coming in, trying to help and trying to solve, but things didn't work out. So this time around, the government was like, you know what, we're going to try to solve this. Let's do it. So you can really sense that from the nation. And like any other nation, Cambodia is a work in progress, of course. So I remember going back after spending some time in Cambodia. I have to make the decision, right, whether I want to take this on or not. And I remember on the flight, I was talking to my colleagues, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to drop this project, right? Because I know deep down in my heart, something was amiss. At that point, I didn't have the language to explain really what it was, but I know it just didn't feel right. It just didn't feel like even it was my problem to solve. And of course, a lot of people at that point is like, Ziqq, you're a failure, man. You should have just taken the money and then figure things out later. And so a lot of this different kind of narrative that was, just coming at me. I had to calm myself down. So I packed my bag. I left for London. I spent the next couple of years there studying in University of the Arts London, where I really took time to reflect. I really took time to do my research, and I did my thesis based on this topic that I'm sharing with you guys today. And from being a failure, I did manage to successfully graduate from the school. And I think the story really is that there was a lot of, just being back in school really allowed me to really reflect and think about how I want to move forward and what happened if this opportunity comes my way again. How can I do things differently? Right? It allowed me to do that. So to give a little bit of context before I go into sharing a little bit more about the case studies, we of course know that there's this rise of global issues, rise of climate change. I think in the 69th UN General Assembly, they did talk about all of these things. They came up with the 17 sustainable goals to combat or tackle things like gender equality, poverty, a lot of different things, right? So we are aware that there's this rise of global issues. So with this rise of global issues, there's also going to be a rise of social innovation, right? People who are now going to try to address these global issues because in nature, we are all problem solvers. So we want to try to solve and address these things. So I'm going to be sharing just 2 case studies very quickly. And this first innovation is called One Laptop Per Child. And the other is Play Pumps. Some of you may or may not heard of it, but I'll go into it, right? So the first one Laptop Per Child, what they were trying to address, right, was to enhance education and a learning experience in the developing world. That's essentially what they were trying to address, right? They come up with this very neat looking design. This was back in 2005, and this laptop cost about $100. And at that point, it was unheard of for a laptop because this cheap. And it looks good, right? Portable for kids, it was kid friendly. It was interesting, right? And it received a lot of media attention. It was also even endorsed by United Nations General Secretary back then, Kofi Annan. So he even endorsed this thing. So they had a lot of money coming in, backing this project. But. So when the laptops actually land into these developing countries, they failed to implement. So meaning now you've got these laptops in the classrooms, but teachers didn't know what to do with them. Because the teachers they already have programs, right? They have pedagogies, they have different ways of how they want to deliver their class or their lessons. And now you've got this laptop here, and I don't know what to do with it. So there was a failure to understand on how to implement effectively this technology, right? And then when it broke down, nobody knew how to fix it. There was no infrastructure. There was a failure to support. Even though One Laptop Per Child claimed that the kids can figure themselves out and figure out the bugs and fix it, it's part of the way that we learn. It was just a little bit of a stretch, right? So it was a failure to support. And lastly, the main intention of having this One Laptop Per Child was to enhance the education system or the learning experience. But in reality, when they did a study across rural Peru, it was reported, as I quote, the children themselves, let me quote the right quote here. It says that the results indicate limited effects on academic achievement, and to improve learning in things like mathematics and language, there's a need for higher quality instruction. So the laptop in itself really didn't help to enhance that learning experience. So I'll move on to the second case study. And this is a quite interesting project, Play Pumps, right? And what they were trying to address is the access to clean, drinkable water. And this is in the context of in Africa, right? So how the merry-go-round system works is that there will be kids playing or spinning this merry-go-round system. It will draw out water from through a borehole underground, and then it will pump it up into a water tank. And from the water tank, it's connected down to a pipe where there's a faucet where then people can have access to clean water. So it's a very neat idea, right? You have fun, right? Trying to draw water or get water. And of course, again, very similar to One Laptop Per Child, they receive a lot of media attention. They received $16.4 million in terms of backing from First Lady Laura Bush, Bill Clinton, Steve Case Foundation. It was even hyped up by Jay-Z for whatever reason. So a lot of people were talking about it. Yeah, come on, it's a really neat, cool, fun idea. But again, right? As soon as they roll out this merry-go-round system, again, there was a failure to support. When it broke down, nobody knew how to fix it. Villagers are left with this colorful thing, not knowing how to fix it, right? And again, there was this reporter, Amy Costello. She did a documentary on Play Pumps. And she uncovered that there was a village in rural Mozambique in Africa they were quite unhappy with this intervention because what they did was they removed their traditional water pump and they replaced it with this merry-go-round system. And then when it broke down, this group of villagers, they had to go to another village to collect water, and it created a lot of tension. And you know, the other villagers like, why are you here? Why are you taking my water and stuff like that? So again, failure to consult. They didn't even ask the villagers, is it okay, or is this fine? They just kind of like remove it and just plonk that in. And lastly, failure to sensitize. And what this really means is when the kids are in school, how do I collect water, right? So now you've got adults playing this very kiddish looking thing. So a lot of the villagers feel, especially the adults, they feel very embarrassed, right? For me to as an adult to play this thing to get water. So it's a failure to sensitize. So what can we learn from these 2 case studies? I'm gonna very quickly map this back into this framework, and I think we're all quite familiar with it. If you're not, it's fine. This is the design thinking methodology, the double diamond. If you guys are familiar with, good. If not, it's fine. As we start off with a general problem, and then we diverge, right? So we have the problem that we want to try to solve. We do some research, and then we converge back in. We get some insights, the things that we learn from our research. Then we specify the problem that we're trying to address, and then we start to ideate based on that problem, where we diverge again, and then we converge back in again, where we test those ideas before we actually go into designing the solution or implementing it. So what does this mean as I map this back out into the 2 case studies, right? So we first, in both stories, they have identified a problem, right? One wanted to do about education, the other one about water, right? Accessible to clean water. Very good, innovative idea, very fun, quirky ideas. They received a lot of money, and then they built and they rolled it out. So I'm not saying that they didn't do those other parts, right? I'm not saying that they didn't do research. I'm not saying that doing all of those other bits in this process, but perhaps there are things there or there's opportunity for us to learn from, right? So for instance, I feel research could have come in really handy if they were really very crucial about things. So meaning they could conduct research on this village because they understand that there's another village that works very, very differently from the, and even this classroom, the way that they run classes is different from another classroom. Because how I would always share with my friends is the metaphor of being a doctor, right? You have your patient coming in saying oh, I've got fever, doctor, or I've got flu. The doctor doesn't just administer the medicine. The doctor will actually do something. So the doctor will ask you where have you been? What do you eat? Where were you? Stuff like that. Or maybe even look at your medical history, right? And only then the doctor will give a solution or the medicine, right? He doesn't just do that because all of us are different. All of us have different needs. Same as the story of the one laptop per child in play palms. The different villages have different needs. Different classrooms have different needs in different countries. So there's a lot of culture, context, a lot of things. And I think another thing that could have prevented a lot of this thing that broke down for them, they had this one laptop per child, they had this merry-go-round system. What they could have done is actually just test it out with the villagers before they implement it. So for instance, the story where the villagers had to go to another village because they didn't consult, that could have been avoided if they've actually tested it out with the villagers, right? Because essentially at the end of the day, this was what was going on, right? The 2 founders, they were disconnected, right? They had these amazing ideas. They were pressured by money. I've got so much money. I've got to roll this out. But they completely lost sight of the people they were designing for on the ground, right? So it was in no surprise that Professor Bruce Nussbaum, he's a professor in Parsons Design School, New School of Design. He came up with this debate about humanitarian design being the new imperialism. And that really got me to think about myself. As me being in the first world country, or from Singapore, going into a country like Cambodia, thinking that I have all the solution in the world, this is the way that we should do it, this is this laptop's going to change your education system. It's kind of quite scary, right? It was kind of it was a reflection point for me, really. And really questioning my intention of why I wanted to be there in the first place. So, takeaways. So, the 3 things that I would like you guys to walk away with from this sharing today. So number 1, to be patient in unpacking the thing that you're trying to address, because there's a lot of value in unpacking those things. I mean, yeah, we've heard about, yeah, do things fast, fail fast, you know, but there's also a lot of wisdom in doing things slow. Yeah, there's a lot of wisdom in there. So unpack the thing, go deep into your research, figure things out, because as Don Norman would say, a brilliant solution to the wrong problem can be worse than no solution at all. So solve the correct problem. In the same case of the doctor, right? I got fever, but then the doctor gives me cough medicine. It doesn't work, right? So giving me the wrong kind of medication is not going to solve anything. Second, never lose sight of the people you're designing for. And those two stories, in those cases, there was a disconnectedness, right? And when I talk about not forgetting who you're designing for, it's not only your main end user, but also your stakeholders, your product owners, all of the people in the ecosystem, the whole solution, right? You have to look at it very holistically. And that was what I was trying to do, right, in Cambodia. I was trying to meet with all of these different organizations, be on the ground, talk to the users, figure things out, right? And last but not least, to really trust your heart, be truthful and be brave. I think, it was quite a moment in my life, right, where I had to turn down such a big amount of money, and a lot of people were just like, "Oh man, you're a shit, Ziqq. You know, you could have been successful." That was your make it or break it moment. And I mean, for me, it took a lot of courage to just stand there and then just stand by what I believe, because at the end of the day, these are, for me, it's real people. You know, these are not just things on computers and numbers and stuff like that. These are people that I'm designing for. Lives are at stake, and I think we need to know that and understand that this is important, especially in the line of work that we do, where we're trying to make things better for people. With that, thank you.
We have a few minutes for questions.
Hi, that was an awesome talk, and thank you for such honesty.
Thank you.
I had a comment on the title of the presentation. It had the word intervention.
Yeah.
My observation is that intervention perhaps is not such a great word for designers per se. The intervention means somehow we know something extra and we'll go there and intervene and something. And a lot of times when we try to intervene, that is when we are in the arrogance mode, and even we don't really realize that we are being arrogant, but it is a kind of arrogance, and it sets us on the wrong path. So maybe we should look at other nomenclatures rather than calling it intervention.
Yep.
Maybe learning or something.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, good point. Yeah, because I think this was obviously they call themselves intervening the society, so I think that was why the language was used in that way, like one laptop per child and play pumps, and they were literally they didn't consider people on the ground, so it was considered as an intervention. But yeah.